Hi, I am Brandon Matthews, 34, founder of Secure Shield Technologies that just sold for $75 million. Growing up, I was always the black sheep, the disappointment, while my younger brother Kyle was the golden child who could do no wrong. After barely speaking for years, I got a shocking call from my parents last month. Not to reconnect or apologize, but with demands that I bail out Kyle from his financial mess. What they never expected was the final gift I left them with, one that would change our family dynamic forever. Before I start my story, drop a comment letting me know where you are watching from and hit that subscribe button if you have ever felt like the outsider in your own family. I grew up in a modest suburban neighborhood in Columbus, Ohio. From my earliest memories, I was always the curious kid who preferred taking apart electronics to playing sports. While other kids were trading baseball cards, I was disassembling old radios and alarm clocks, trying to understand the intricate circuitry inside. My parents never understood this fascination. Dad would shake his head in frustration when he found me surrounded by components on the living room floor. "Why can't you just play normal things like other kids?" he would ask, the disappointment evident in his voice. Everything changed when my brother Kyle was born when I was 3. From the beginning, he was everything I wasn't: outgoing, athletic, and conventionally talented. By elementary school, the comparisons became relentless. Kyle brought home perfect report cards with straight As in traditional subjects, while my grades were uneven, struggling with subjects that bored me while excelling beyond my grade level in math and science. "Why can't you be more like your brother?" became the soundtrack of my childhood. When Kyle hit his first home run in Little League at age 7, my parents threw a massive celebration, inviting the entire extended family. 2 weeks later, when I won first place in a regional programming competition for students twice my age, my achievement was acknowledged with a distracted, "That's nice, Brandon," as my mom continued preparing for Kyle's upcoming soccer tournament. I still remember one family dinner when I was 14 that crystallized our family dynamic. I had just found out I had been accepted into a prestigious summer coding camp at MIT, a program normally reserved for high school juniors and seniors. I waited until everyone was seated at the dinner table to share my news, barely containing my excitement. "Mom, Dad, I got accepted into the MIT summer coding program," I announced, my voice slightly shaking with anticipation. Dad barely looked up from his plate. "That's going to be expensive, Brandon. We're already stretched thin with Kyle's travel baseball team." Before I could respond, Kyle interrupted. "Coach said I might be team captain next season." The entire conversation immediately shifted to Kyle's potential captaincy. My mother beamed with pride. "That's wonderful, sweetie captain. As a freshman, that's incredible." The rest of dinner was dedicated to discussing Kyle's baseball prospects, while my MIT acceptance faded into background noise. High school only widened the gap. While Kyle became the quintessential popular student sports star, homecoming king, student body president, I retreated further into the world of computers and coding. I found refuge in the computer lab during lunch periods, to avoid the cafeteria where I never quite fit in. The few friends I had shared my interests in programming and technology, and we were firmly positioned at the bottom of the social hierarchy. My parents' disappointment in me grew more overt. When career day came around in junior year, my father openly laughed when I mentioned wanting to create my own tech company someday. "Be realistic, Brandon. Those Silicon Valley types are exceptional. You need to think about something stable like accounting." Meanwhile, Kyle's dreams of playing college baseball were supported with expensive training camps and private coaching sessions. The breaking point came during my senior year. I had been accepted to several state universities with partial scholarships for computer science, but nothing that would cover full tuition. During a discussion about college finances, my father made it painfully clear where I stood. "We've been saving for Kyle's education since he was born," my father explained. "His athletic scholarship prospects are good, but we need to be prepared in case those don't pan out. We just don't have extra for your schooling." When I pointed out the unfairness of this arrangement, my mother seemed genuinely perplexed. "Kyle has real potential, Brandon. We need to invest in his future." "And what about my future?" I asked, my voice rising with years of suppressed hurt. My father's response cut deep. "Let's be honest, Brandon. You've always been different. Not everyone is destined for greatness. Some people just need to find a stable job and be content with that. That night I overheard them talking in the kitchen when they thought I was upstairs. "I worry about Brandon," my mother said. "He's just so odd. Do you think we did something wrong?" "He's just wasted potential," my father replied. "A disappointment to the family. Thank God we have Kyle." Those words burned into my soul, crystallizing a determination that would fuel me through the darkest times ahead. That night, I made a promise to myself I would prove them wrong. I would become successful on my own terms without their support or validation. As high school graduation approached, the emotional distance between us became a chasm. While my parents attended every one of Kyle's games, taking hundreds of photos and cheering loudly from the stands, they barely acknowledged my graduation as valedictorian of my class. My speech that day was delivered to an audience where my own parents sat stone-faced and checked their watches repeatedly, eager to leave for Kyle's baseball tournament scheduled later that afternoon. It was during these formative years that I realized a painful truth in my parents' eyes. I wasn't just a different kind of son. I was competition for their love and attention, a competition I was never meant to win. Kyle wasn't just the favorite. He was the only child they truly wanted. I was the mistake they were perpetually trying to correct, the square peg they kept trying to hammer into a round hole, until both the peg and the hole were damaged beyond repair. When college acceptance letters arrived, I had several options but chose State University's computer science program, which offered me a partial merit scholarship covering about 60% of tuition. I still remember the conversation when I asked my parents for help with the remaining costs. "We just don't have it, Brandon," my father said flatly. "We're putting aside everything extra for Kyle's future. He might need to attend a private university if the athletic scholarships don't come through." "But that's 2 years away," I argued. "Kyle isn't even a junior yet." My mother's response was telling. "We need to be prepared. His future is important." The unspoken implication hung in the air, mine wasn't. I moved into a cramped dorm room that fall with exactly $217 to my name, money I had saved from my part-time job at the local electronics store. Within a week, I had applied to every job on campus and secured 3 morning shifts at the campus coffee shop, starting at 5:30, evening work at the library, and weekend hours at the computer lab. Between classes and work, I averaged about 4 hours of sleep per night. My roommate, Derek, came from a wealthy family and couldn't comprehend my situation. "Dude, just ask your parents for money," he suggested after finding me asleep at my desk for the 3rd time that week. "Not an option," I replied simply. I never explained further. Despite the exhaustion, I maintained a 4.0 GPA and began developing my first app, a simple campus navigation tool that helped students find the quickest routes between classes. I coded between shifts, often working until 2 or 3 in the morning before grabbing a quick nap and starting again at the coffee shop. By the end of my freshman year, I was running on fumes. During finals week, I collapsed in the computer lab, waking up to a concerned professor shaking my shoulder. Professor Jenkins wasn't even my instructor, but he had noticed my dedication during his late-night visits to the lab. "You can't keep going like this," he said after I groggily explained my schedule. "You're going to burn out before you ever get started." Professor Jenkins became the mentor I never expected. He arranged for me to receive a research stipend that allowed me to drop one of my jobs. More importantly, he believed in my potential when no one else did. Meanwhile, Kyle had been recruited by several Division II colleges with partial athletic scholarships. My parents spent thousands on college visits, professional highlight reels, and training camps to maximize his opportunities. I learned about these expenditures through Facebook posts my mother made, proudly documenting every step of Kyle's journey, while my existence remained unacknowledged on her social media. During my sophomore year, I launched my campus navigation app with high hopes. A small angel investor had provided $10,000 in seed funding based on Professor Jenkins' recommendation. The launch was a disaster. The server crashed under unexpected demand, data was lost, and within a week the investor pulled out, leaving me with crushing guilt and debt. I fell into a deep depression. For 3 weeks I barely left my room except for classes and work. Professor Jenkins finally intervened, forcing me to meet him for coffee. "Every entrepreneur fails," he said firmly. "The successful ones are just the ones who get back up." That Christmas, I reluctantly returned home after my mother insisted it would look strange to the relatives if I didn't appear. The moment I walked through the door, I felt like a stranger in my childhood home. My room had been converted into a shrine to Kyle's achievements. Trophies, medals, and photos covered every surface. I was relegated to the pull-out couch in the basement. During the holiday gathering, I overheard my father telling my uncle about Kyle's baseball prospects while gesturing toward me. "Brandon's still figuring things out," he said dismissively, despite the fact I was maintaining perfect grades while working multiple jobs. Later that evening, when I mentioned my app and its failure, my father scoffed. "See, this is why we told you to choose something practical. Not everyone is cut out for innovation." The argument that followed was explosive. Years of resentment poured out as I finally confronted them about their blatant favoritism. My mother's response was revealing. "We've always treated you both the same. You've just always been difficult, Brandon. Always so sensitive and demanding." I left that night driving back to campus in a snowstorm, knowing I wouldn't return for a long time. The next semester was my lowest point. The cheap off-campus housing I had arranged fell through, and for 2 weeks I slept in my car in the campus parking lot, showering at the gym and studying in the 24-hour library. I seriously considered dropping out, questioning whether all this struggle was worth it. The turning point came from an unexpected source. While coding at an all-night diner, the only place I could afford that offered free Wi-Fi and unlimited coffee refills, I struck up a conversation with an older man who turned out to be a former software engineer. He had lost everything during the dot-com bust and never recovered. "Don't make my mistake," he told me, his eyes reflecting years of regret. "I gave up after one failure. One. That's all it took to derail my entire life." His words haunted me. The next morning, I approached the financial aid office about emergency housing assistance and recommitted to my education and entrepreneurial dreams. If I was going to succeed, it would be without the safety net of family support that so many of my peers took for granted. I moved into a tiny studio apartment with peeling paint and unreliable heat, but it was mine, a space where I could work and dream without judgment. There, surrounded by ramen noodle packages and computer equipment I had salvaged from campus dumpsters, I began to rebuild my confidence and vision for the future. While Kyle continued to receive my parents' unwavering support, including a brand new car for his 18th birthday and fully funded spring break trips to Cancun, I worked through holidays and summers, accumulating knowledge and an experience that would prove far more valuable than any material gift. My parents never asked if I needed help, and I never asked. Pride and pain formed an impenetrable barrier between us. The idea that would change my life came during my junior year. Working the night shift at a local data processing company, I witnessed a security breach that compromised thousands of customer records. The company's outdated security protocols had left them vulnerable, yet their response was merely to patch the existing system rather than address the fundamental flaws. "There has to be a better way," I told Professor Jenkins during one of our weekly mentoring sessions. "Current security software is reactive, not proactive. What if we could create something that anticipates breaches before they happen?" That conversation sparked the concept for what would eventually become SecureShield Technologies. For the next 6 months, I dedicated every free moment to developing the framework for my adaptive security algorithm. My schedule became even more grueling: classes during the day, work shifts in the evening, and coding until 3 or 4 in the morning. I survived on ramen noodles, energy drinks, and determination. By the time senior year rolled around, I had a promising prototype, but lacked the business expertise to turn it into a viable product. That changed when I attended a campus tech meetup and met Sarah Donovan, an MBA student with experience in startup ventures. Unlike most people who glazed over when I explained my technical concepts, Sarah immediately grasped the market potential. "You're solving a problem most companies don't even realize they have yet," she said after I demonstrated the prototype. "That's the holy grail of innovation." Sarah became my business partner, bringing complementary skills that transformed my technical creation into a marketable product. While I refined the algorithm, she developed the business plan, market analysis, and pitch deck that would eventually secure our funding. Our first investment came from Professor Jenkins, who believed in us enough to contribute $20,000 of his own money, nearly his entire savings. "Consider it an investment in the future," he said, waving away my concerns about the risk. Sometimes you have to bet on the person, not just the product. That initial funding kept us afloat during the grueling process of seeking serious investment. Sarah and I pitched to 47 different potential investors over 6 months. We received 46 rejections, each one testing my already fragile self-confidence. Your technology is interesting, they would say, but you're too young, too inexperienced. Come back when you have more traction. The 47th pitch changed everything. Marcel Winters, a veteran tech investor known for taking chances on unproven founders, saw what others had missed. "Everyone is focusing on what you haven't done," he said after our presentation. "I'm more interested in what you've accomplished with virtually no resources. Imagine what you could do with proper funding." Marcel invested $100,000 for a 15% stake in our company. It seemed like an enormous sum to me at the time, enough to rent a small office space, purchase essential equipment, and pay ourselves modest salaries that meant I could finally quit my night jobs. Our first office was a converted storage room above a Chinese restaurant in the less desirable part of town. The space was barely 400 square feet, with unreliable air conditioning and the constant smell of fried rice wafting through the vents. But it was ours, and the moment Sarah and I hung our hand-printed Secure Shield Technologies sign on the door remains one of my proudest memories. The breakthrough came 6 months later, when a mid-sized healthcare provider experienced a ransomware attack that our software detected and neutralized before it could encrypt their patient records. Word spread quickly within the industry, and suddenly we were fielding calls from companies that had previously ignored our outreach. Our first major client, Meridian Health Systems, signed a 3-year contract worth $350,000. The night after finalizing that deal, I sat alone in our tiny office, overwhelmed by emotion. For the first time, I allowed myself to believe that success might actually be possible. With that first major contract, we were able to hire 2 employees, a developer named Miguel, who had graduated from my alma mater, and a sales representative named Rachel, who had extensive contacts in the healthcare industry. Our tiny team worked 14-hour days, 7 days a week, fueled by a shared belief in our mission to revolutionize cybersecurity. As the company grew, I experienced the strange adjustment to financial stability. After years of counting every penny, I found myself with a reliable salary. My first significant purchase was a modest 2-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood. Nothing extravagant, but after years of dorm rooms, cars, and tiny apartments, it felt like a mansion. The day I received the keys, I sat alone on the empty living room floor and cried with a mixture of pride and disbelief. Industry recognition followed as our client list expanded. Secure Shield won Most Innovative Security Solution at a prominent tech conference, and I was named to a under 30 list for emerging tech leaders. With each achievement, I felt a complicated mixture of validation and lingering hurt. Success tasted sweet, but part of me still longed for the parental approval I would never receive. I attempted to share my growing success with my family a few times. I sent an email when we secured our first major client, another when we won the Innovation Award, and a brief message when we moved to larger offices. Each time the responses were perfunctory at best. "That's nice, Brandon," my mother replied to the award announcement. "Kyle just got promoted to assistant manager at his company. We're so proud of him." Meanwhile, Kyle had graduated with a business degree after 5.5 years of mediocre academic performance. His baseball career had ended with a minor injury sophomore year, but my parents had continued to fully support him, paying for his apartment car and living expenses throughout college and beyond. Upon graduation, he expected to immediately step into a high-paying management role despite lacking any distinguishing skills or experience. When Kyle struggled to find the prestigious position he felt entitled to, my parents blamed the economy, the job market, and hiring discrimination, everything except Kyle's own limitations. They subsidized his apartment in a trendy neighborhood and financed his lifestyle while he found himself. Meanwhile, I had been fully self-sufficient since 18, working multiple jobs while maintaining perfect grades and building a company. The real game changer for Secure Shield came during our 4th year of operation. A series of high-profile data breaches at major corporations had made cybersecurity a top priority across industries. Our proactive approach to security positioned us perfectly for this new market awareness. Suddenly, clients we had been pursuing for years were calling us eager to implement our solutions. We secured Series A funding that valued the company at $15 million. My stake translated to a net worth of over $6 million on paper, a number so far beyond my comprehension that it didn't feel real. The first time I checked my bank account and saw a seven-figure balance, I sat staring at the screen for nearly an hour, unable to process that the number belonged to me. By our 5th year, SecureShield had grown to 48 employees and moved into prestigious offices in the heart of Seattle's tech district. We had clients across North America, Europe, and Asia, with annual recurring revenue exceeding $12 million. I had become a respected figure in the cybersecurity industry, speaking at conferences and advising government committees on data protection. Then came the acquisition offer that would change everything. TechGuard Industries, one of the largest security companies in the world, offered to purchase SecureShield for $75 million. After weeks of negotiation and soul-searching, Sarah and I agreed to the deal, ensuring that our employees would be retained and our technology would reach an even wider market. At 32 years old, I became a multi-millionaire overnight. The scared, exhausted college student sleeping in his car seemed like a different person, entirely a chapter from someone else's life. Yet the emotional wounds of my childhood remained unhealed, a persistent ache beneath the surface of my success. The day the acquisition made headlines in the business press, my phone rang, with a number I barely recognized anymore, my parents' home line. After 6 years of minimal contact, limited to brief text messages on holidays, my mother's voice sounded strange in my ear. "Brandon, we just saw you in Business Weekly. Why didn't you tell us about selling your company?" Her tone was a mixture of excitement and accusation, as though I had deliberately kept secrets from them rather than simply maintaining the distance they had established years ago. "It just finalized last week," I replied neutrally, unsure how to navigate this sudden interest in my life. "Well, we're just so proud," she gushed. "Always knew you would do well with those computer things. We should have dinner soon to celebrate." The abrupt shift in her attitude gave me emotional whiplash. After years of dismissal and disappointment, I was suddenly the son worth acknowledging. Despite my wariness, a small, persistent part of me, the child still seeking parental approval, responded to the olive branch. Perhaps I thought success had finally made me visible to them. We arranged dinner at an upscale restaurant in Seattle, where I had settled after the acquisition. My parents flew in from Ohio, and Kyle drove up from Portland, where he had been working in sales for the past year. Walking into the restaurant, I felt a strange mixture of accomplishment and anxiety, the successful prodigal son returning to the family fold. The awkwardness was palpable from the first moments. My father, grayer and slightly stooped, extended his hand formally as though greeting a business associate rather than his son. My mother hugged me stiffly, her perfume overwhelming and unfamiliar. Kyle, sporting an expensive watch that seemed at odds with his supposedly entry-level position, offered a tight smile that didn't reach his eyes. "This is quite a place," my father commented, glancing around at the elegant decor. "Must be nice to afford this kind of lifestyle." The undercurrent of his statement was clear. My wealth, not my well-being, was the reason for this reunion. Throughout dinner, my parents peppered me with questions about the acquisition, focusing intently on the financial aspects, while showing little interest in the actual work or innovation behind it. When I attempted to share stories about the early struggles and pivotal moments that shaped the company's growth, my mother nodded distractedly before shifting the conversation back to Kyle's recent promotion to regional sales representative. "He's on track for management," she said proudly. "Always had natural leadership abilities." My father leaned forward, swirling his expensive bourbon. "So Brandon, what are you doing with all that money? Good investments, I hope." Before I could answer, he continued with what sounded like a rehearsed speech. "You know, we always believed in you, always knew you had potential. We just showed it differently, because you were always so independent." The revisionist history was jarring. In their new narrative, they had been supportive parents who recognized my unique talents, rather than the people who had called me a disappointment and refused to help with my education while fully funding Kyle's. As the evening progressed, Kyle became increasingly sullen, making passive-aggressive comments about lucky breaks and how some people have all the advantages. The irony of his statement, given our respective paths, was apparently lost on him. Over dessert, my mother finally revealed the true purpose of the reunion. "Kyle's been going through a rough patch lately," she said, her voice dropping to a confidential tone. "The company he was with downsized, and he's between positions right now." My father jumped in. "Outstanding employee, of course. Just corporate politics. You know how it is." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, sincerely, turning to Kyle. "I have some great contacts in the tech industry if you're interested. We're always looking for good sales talent." Kyle's expression soured further. "I'm not looking for charity," he snapped. My mother patted his hand. "Kyle's exploring his options, but in the meantime there are some financial considerations. His lease is up next month, and with the job situation, family should help family," my father added pointedly. "Now that you're in a position to do so." The real agenda became crystal clear. I wasn't invited to dinner for a reconciliation, but for a withdrawal. After years of minimal contact, I was suddenly valuable as an ATM. Despite the revelation, I made a genuine offer. "I'd be happy to help Kyle network and find a position where his skills would be valued," I said. "I know how tough the job market can be." My proposal was met with uncomfortable silence. Kyle stared at his plate while my parents exchanged glances. "That's thoughtful," my mother finally said, her tone indicating it was anything but. "But what Kyle really needs right now is some breathing room. Financial stability while he considers his next move." "What exactly are you asking for?" I questioned directly. "Well," my father cleared his throat, "we thought perhaps a loan. Something to tide him over for 6 months or so. Say 50,000, just until he lands on his feet." The amount was significant not because I couldn't afford it, but because it revealed they had discussed this extensively before contacting me. This wasn't a spontaneous request, it was a calculated extraction. I promised to consider their request and ended the evening with a polite but distant goodbye. Driving home, I felt a profound sense of disappointment. The reconnection I had secretly hoped for was nothing more than a financial transaction. Over the next few weeks, the frequency of calls and texts from my parents increased dramatically. Each conversation circled back to Kyle's temporary problems and included subtle guilt trips about my childhood family obligations and how parents sacrifice everything for their children, conveniently ignoring that their sacrifices had been exclusively for Kyle. Curious about the sudden urgency, I discreetly inquired about Kyle's situation through mutual connections. What I discovered was troubling. Kyle had been fired, not downsized, after missing sales targets for 3 consecutive quarters. Despite his supposedly dire financial straits, his Instagram showed recent posts from expensive restaurants, a weekend ski trip, and photos of a brand new sports car. Most concerning was information from a former colleague who mentioned Kyle's regular visits to casinos and online gambling sites. The pieces began to fall into place: his erratic employment history, the constant need for loans from my parents, the flash lifestyle beyond his means. I arranged a meeting with my family to address these concerns directly. We met at my parents' hotel suite during their second visit to Seattle, ostensibly to finalize arrangements for Kyle's support. Before we discuss any financial assistance, I began carefully. "I think we need to address the actual issues Kyle is facing." My mother's brow furrowed. "What do you mean he told you he's between jobs?" "I'm concerned there might be a gambling problem," I said as gently as possible. "The pattern of behavior suggests—" Kyle exploded before I could finish. "You've been spying on me. Who the hell do you think you are?" My father stood up, face flushed with anger. "This is ridiculous. Kyle has had some bad luck, that's all. Not everyone can be a tech genius with million-dollar investors." "I'm not judging," I insisted. "I'm concerned. If there's a gambling addiction, money won't solve the problem, it might make it worse." My mother's expression hardened. "This is just like you, Brandon. Always thinking you're better than everyone else. Always the outsider, never really part of this family." Her words struck with precision, targeting the deepest insecurity of my childhood. In that moment, I realized a painful truth: no amount of success would ever change how they saw me. I would always be the other son, the one who didn't quite belong. The meeting ended with my father's parting shot. Kyle has always been there for us, always been the good son. I guess we know where your priorities lie. As they left, I felt a strange mixture of grief and liberation. The fantasy of finally earning their approval through success dissolved, leaving behind the reality that some relationships cannot be healed no matter how much we might wish otherwise. 2 months of blessed silence followed our confrontation. I threw myself into new projects, began mentoring young entrepreneurs at my alma mater, and started therapy to address the lingering pain of my family relationships. The distance felt healthy, a necessary boundary after years of seeking validation from people fundamentally incapable of providing it. Then came the frantic midnight call that shattered my hard-won peace. "Brandon, you need to help us right now." My mother's voice was shrill with panic. "Kyle is in serious trouble." The story spilled out in disjointed fragments. Kyle had accumulated gambling debts exceeding $100,000. Some of his creditors weren't the type who sent polite collection notices. They employed more direct methods of enforcement. He had already received threatening visits at his apartment and workplace. "We've mortgaged the house," my father admitted, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. "Took out a second mortgage to cover what we could, but it's not enough. They're saying they'll hurt him if he doesn't pay the rest by the end of the month." The underlying message was clear. They expected me to write a check and make the problem disappear. Not offer counsel, not help address the addiction driving the behavior, just provide cash to enable the next cycle of destruction. "This is serious," I acknowledged. "Kyle needs professional help, both for his safety and for the gambling addiction." My father's voice hardened. "There's no addiction. He just got in over his head. Are you going to help your brother or not?" I promised to consider options and hung up, immediately contacting both my financial advisor and a therapist who specialized in addiction and family systems. Over the next week, I educated myself extensively about gambling addiction, enabling behaviors, and how financial bailouts often perpetuate rather than solve the underlying issues. My research led me to develop a comprehensive support plan. I would pay off Kyle's dangerous debts directly to ensure his safety, but the rest of my assistance would be structured around recovery, residential treatment for his gambling addiction, ongoing therapy, financial counseling, and a graduated system of support tied to his progress in treatment. No direct cash would go to Kyle or my parents. When I presented this plan during a video call with my family, their reaction was immediate and negative. "This is ridiculous," Kyle snarled. "I don't need to be locked up in some rehab place. I just need to clear these debts and get a fresh start." My mother sided with him instantly. "Brandon, you're being controlling. Your brother just needs your help, not all these conditions." "These aren't conditions," I explained patiently. "This is actual help. Giving Kyle money without addressing the gambling is like giving an alcoholic a bottle of whiskey." My father's face reddened. "Don't you dare compare your brother to some addict. He made some mistakes, that's all. Everyone makes mistakes." "Dad, I've made more mistakes than most," I said quietly. "The difference is, I've had to face consequences for mine. Kyle never has." The conversation deteriorated from there. Kyle accused me of showing off my success and using the situation to make him look bad. My parents portrayed my evidence-based approach as a power play rather than genuine concern. By the end of the call, we were back where we started, with them demanding cash and me offering real help instead. The situation escalated a week later when Kyle showed up at my home unannounced and clearly intoxicated. My security system alerted me to someone shouting at my front gate around 11:30 at night. Through the camera, I could see Kyle pounding on the intercom button. "Open up, you self-righteous asshole," he slurred. "You think you're so much better than everyone else with your fancy house and your millions." I spoke through the intercom, trying to calm him. "Kyle, you're drunk. Let me call you an Uber to get you back to your hotel safely." "I don't need your charity," he spat. "I need what's owed to me. Mom and Dad gave you everything, all their attention, because you were the special one who needed extra help. Now you won't even help your own brother." His revisionist version of our childhood was so wildly inaccurate, it would have been laughable if it weren't so painful. As he continued shouting and began throwing small rocks at the security camera, I had no choice but to call private security. When they arrived to escort him off the property, he became physically aggressive, resulting in them contacting local police. The fallout was immediate and severe. My parents called the next morning beside themselves with rage. "How could you have your own brother arrested?" my mother sobbed, though Kyle had only been briefly detained and released without charges. "He was drunk, trespassing, and becoming violent," I explained calmly. I was concerned for his safety as well as mine. "He's your brother," my father growled. "Family handles things privately, like the way you've handled his gambling addiction, by refinancing your retirement home and enabling destructive behavior." The conversation ended with my father's threat. "You need to decide what's more important to you, your money or your family, because you can't have both." 3 days later, I received a lengthy email from my parents. The message laid out their position in no uncertain terms either. I transfer $250,000 to help Kyle get back on his feet, or I would be permanently cut off from the family. No contact, no reconciliation, no future relationship, unless I complied with their demands. The ultimatum triggered several sleepless nights. Despite everything, some stubborn part of me still craved their approval, still hoped for the loving family I had never truly had. I consulted my therapist about the situation during an emergency session. "What do you feel is your responsibility here?" she asked after I explained the ultimatum. "I want to help Kyle," I answered honestly. "But giving him money with no accountability isn't helping, it's hurting. It's perpetuating behaviors that will eventually destroy him." "And your parents? They're so enmeshed with Kyle, they can't see the damage they're doing. They've built their entire identity around being his saviors." She nodded thoughtfully. "Family systems often resist change even when that change would be healthy. Your parents and Kyle have established a dysfunctional equilibrium that feels normal to them. Your refusal to participate threatens that equilibrium." After much reflection, I drafted a response to my parents' ultimatum. The letter was both boundary-setting and compassionate, explaining why I couldn't enable destructive behavior while reiterating my offer of substantial support for actual recovery. I closed by saying I would always be open to a healthier relationship if they ever wanted one, but I wouldn't compromise my principles or Kyle's well-being by providing funds that would ultimately fuel his addiction. Hitting send on that email was one of the hardest things I've ever done. It felt like closing a door that had never fully opened in the first place. The response to my boundary setting was swift and vindictive. Within days, my mother began posting vague but pointed comments on social media about ungrateful children and abandonment when families need help most. These posts quickly evolved into more specific allegations, sharing private family matters with her entire network. Heartbroken that my son would refuse to help his own brother after we sacrificed everything for his education, she wrote conveniently, forgetting they had contributed nothing to my college expenses while fully funding Kyle's. Meanwhile, Kyle's behavior became increasingly concerning. He began sending threatening text messages at all hours, ranging from guilt-tripping hope, "You enjoy your millions while your brother suffers," to explicitly threatening, "You better watch your back, success isn't worth much if you're not around to enjoy it." The situation reached a breaking point when Kyle appeared at my company's headquarters during a meeting with potential investors. He created a scene in the lobby, shouting accusations and demanding to see me. Security had to escort him from the premises, causing significant embarrassment and concern among my colleagues and business associates. Following legal advice, I reluctantly filed for a restraining order against Kyle. The decision wasn't made lightly, but his escalating behavior had crossed from merely annoying to potentially dangerous. The court granted a temporary order based on the documented pattern of harassment and threatening messages. My parents' reaction to the restraining order was explosive. My father left a voicemail so filled with rage and profanity that I couldn't listen to it in its entirety. My mother sent a lengthy email declaring me dead to the family and claiming I had always been cruel and calculating even as a child. The public and private attacks took a significant emotional toll. Despite my outward success, I found myself retreating into isolation, questioning my own memories, and wondering if I was indeed the villain in this family drama. My therapy sessions intensified as I struggled with waves of guilt, grief, and anger. In the midst of this turmoil came an unexpected message from my mother's sister, Aunt Caroline. We had never been particularly close during my childhood as she lived on the opposite coast and visited only occasionally. Her email was cautious, but supportive. "I've been watching what's happening with your family," she wrote. "There's more to this story than what your mother is sharing online. I'd like to talk if you're open to it." Our subsequent phone conversation revealed family dynamics I had never fully understood. According to Aunt Caroline, the pattern of favoritism in our family extended back generations. My grandfather had clearly preferred my mother over her sister, creating a dysfunctional template that my mother unconsciously replicated with her own children. "Your mother needs one child to succeed and one to fail," Aunt Caroline explained. "It's the only family dynamic she knows. When you started becoming successful, it threatened the entire system." Even more shocking was her revelation about financial matters. Years earlier, when I had first started earning decent money at SecureShield, I had sent my parents a check for $10,000 as a gift for their anniversary, hoping to begin healing our relationship. According to Aunt Caroline, that money had gone directly to covering one of Kyle's gambling debts, a fact they had hidden from me. "This has been going on for years," she explained. "They've been bailing him out since college, refinancing their house twice already. Your father's retirement fund is completely depleted." Armed with this new understanding, I proposed a meeting, one final attempt to address the situation honestly. I suggested a neutral location with Aunt Caroline present as a mediator. To my surprise, my parents agreed, though they insisted Kyle should attend as well. We met at a private conference room in a hotel midway between our locations. The tension was palpable as we gathered around the table. My parents looking older and more haggard than I remembered Kyle, fidgeting nervously. Aunt Caroline's calm presence, a stark contrast to the emotional storm brewing. My father opened with an attack disguised as a question. "After all we've done for you, how could you turn your back on your family?" Rather than reacting defensively, I responded with specific examples. "What exactly did you do for me, Dad? Was it refusing to help with my college tuition while paying for Kyle's? Was it converting my childhood bedroom into a trophy room for Kyle before I even moved out? Or was it telling me I was a disappointment to the family when I was 17? My mother gasped. "We never said that." "You did," I continued steadily. "I heard you through the kitchen door. You said I was wasted potential and a disappointment to the family, and then added, 'Thank God we have Kyle.'" The specific details of that night, details I had never shared with them, left them momentarily speechless. "We may have said some things in frustration," my father finally conceded. "But parents make mistakes. That doesn't justify abandoning your brother when he needs help." "I haven't abandoned Kyle," I countered. "I've offered substantial help, just not in the form of cash that would enable his gambling addiction." "There's no addiction," my mother insisted, though her voice lacked conviction. I turned to Kyle directly. "Tell them the truth. How long have you been gambling? How much have you really lost?" Kyle's face contorted with anger, then crumpled into something more vulnerable. To everyone's shock, he broke down. Since sophomore year of college, he admitted, tears streaming down his face. "The first time was just a poker game in the dorm. I won big and got hooked on the feeling. Then I started losing. Mom and Dad always bailed me out, so there were never any real consequences." My parents stared at him in disbelief as he continued. "I've probably lost over $300,000 total over the years. Every time I swear it's the last time, but then there's another game, another chance to win it all back." He looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. "I hated you for so long because you were everything I wasn't: disciplined, self-sufficient, successful on your own terms. It was easier to blame you than face my own failures." The raw honesty of his confession shifted something in the room. For perhaps the first time, we were speaking truthfully, rather than maintaining the family mythology. "We just wanted to help," my mother whispered. "We thought we were supporting you." "You weren't," Kyle replied bitterly. "You were trapping me. Every time I failed, you rushed in to fix everything, then reminded me how lucky I was to have such devoted parents. It made me feel even more worthless." The conversation shifted to how my parents had unconsciously pitted us against each other, Kyle as the golden child who could do no wrong, me as the problem child who could do no right. Neither role had served either of us well. I'm offering Kyle real help, I said firmly. I'll pay for a top-tier treatment program for gambling addiction. I'll cover the dangerous debts to ensure his safety. But I won't give cash directly to enable more gambling. And what about us? My father demanded. We've sacrificed everything for this family. No, I replied quietly. You sacrificed everything for Kyle. There's a difference. The truth hung heavy in the air. Kyle surprised everyone by speaking up. I want to take Brandon's offer. I need help. Real help. Not another bailout. My parents reacted with shock and betrayal. You can't be serious, my father sputtered. You're choosing his side over ours. There shouldn't be sides in a family, Kyle responded. That's part of the problem. My mother stood up, grabbing her purse. This is ridiculous. We're your parents. We know what's best for you. As they prepared to leave, I made one final statement. I'm no longer seeking your approval. I spent most of my life trying to earn your love, never realizing it wasn't something I should have had to earn in the first place. My father's parting shot was predictable. Don't expect anything from us again. No contact, no inheritance, nothing. As the door closed behind them, a strange sense of peace washed over me. The fantasy of parental approval that had haunted me since childhood finally dissipated, replaced by the reality that family isn't always defined by blood. Sometimes it's defined by who chooses to remain when the storms come. Kyle looked at me uncertainly. Did I just destroy my relationship with Mom and Dad? No, I replied. You just took the first step toward healing it and yourself. 6 months passed, bringing changes I never could have anticipated. The distance from my parents continued, but it no longer carried the ache of rejection it once had. Through therapy and self-reflection, I had come to understand that their approval had never been something I could earn, not because of any deficiency in me, but because of limitations within them. Kyle completed a 90-day residential treatment program for gambling addiction, followed by intensive outpatient therapy and regular Gamblers Anonymous meetings. The transformation in him was remarkable, not just in his abstinence from gambling, but in his growing self-awareness and accountability. I never realized how much of my identity was wrapped up in being the golden child, he confessed during one of our weekly phone calls. It was a role I never asked for but felt obligated to maintain, even when it was destroying me. Our relationship, once defined by competition and resentment, gradually evolved into something resembling actual brotherhood. We discovered shared interests and values that had been obscured by our parents' dysfunctional system. For the first time, we were getting to know each other as individuals rather than as assigned roles in a family drama. My parents remained distant, occasionally sending terse updates through Aunt Caroline, but maintaining their position that I had betrayed the family by refusing to provide unconditional financial support. Despite their continued rejection, I made a difficult decision regarding their future. Working with my financial advisors and attorneys, I established a trust fund specifically designed to provide for my parents' retirement and healthcare needs. The structure was carefully crafted. They could not access the principal. Only the income and funds could only be used for legitimate retirement expenses, housing, medical care, utilities, and basic needs. Most importantly, none of the money could be redirected to Kyle or used to cover gambling debts. When the trust documents were finalized, I sent them to my parents with a simple note. This is my final gift to you, not because you earned it, but because it's who I choose to be. Their initial response was predictably negative. My mother called it controlling and conditional love, while my father refused to acknowledge it at all. Yet, as their financial situation deteriorated further, the consequence of decades of bailing out Kyle, they quietly began accepting the monthly distributions from the trust. Meanwhile, I focused on building the kind of family I had always wanted one, based on mutual respect and genuine connection, rather than obligation and control. My mentor, Professor Jenkins, remained a father figure in my life. Sarah, my business partner, became like a sister. Close friends and colleagues formed a support network that proved far more reliable than the biological family that had rejected me. Through therapy, I experienced several breakthrough moments, particularly around releasing my need for parental validation. You've been seeking something they fundamentally cannot provide, my therapist observed during a particularly insightful session. It's like trying to draw water from a dry well. Kyle's progress in recovery brought its own challenges and rewards. After completing the initial intensive treatment, he struggled with finding purpose and direction. With my encouragement, he became trained as a peer counselor for gambling addiction, using his own experience to help others on similar paths. For the first time in his life, he was defining success on his own terms, rather than through our parents' expectations. "I never thought I'd say this," he told me during a weekend visit to my home, but hitting rock bottom was the best thing that ever happened to me. It forced me to figure out who I actually am beyond the golden child image. Approximately 8 months after our confrontation, my mother reached out tentatively. The email was brief and cautious, with none of the emotional manipulation that had characterized our previous interactions. She expressed interest in seeing me during an upcoming trip to Seattle, adding that she would understand if I preferred not to meet. The lunch that followed was awkward, but represented the first honest conversation we had ever had. There were no grand apologies or dramatic reconciliations, just small steps toward a different kind of relationship. "I've been doing some reading about family dynamics," she admitted hesitantly. "Some of it has been uncomfortable to recognize in myself." My father remained more resistant to change, maintaining minimal contact and continuing to view my boundaries as personal attacks rather than necessary health measures. Yet even he showed small signs of evolution, occasionally asking actual questions about my life rather than making assumptions or comparisons. The most unexpected development came when Kyle approached me with an idea for a foundation supporting first-generation college students without family financial backing, students whose circumstances mirrored my own college inexperience. Together we developed a program that provided not just scholarships but mentorship, emotional support, and practical guidance for navigating higher education without family resources. "I want something good to come from our family dysfunction," Kyle explained. "Maybe our story can help others avoid the same patterns." Working alongside my brother on this meaningful project healed wounds I hadn't realized still existed. We would never have the carefree childhood bond that some siblings enjoy, but we were building something perhaps more valuable, a relationship based on mutual respect and shared values rather than competition and resentment. As for my parents, our relationship remained complicated. During a rare phone call approximately 1 year after our confrontation, my father made a statement that represented perhaps the closest thing to an apology I would ever receive. "We didn't always understand you," he said gruffly. "Maybe we should have tried harder." It wasn't a perfect reconciliation, those exist primarily in movies and novels, but it was a small acknowledgement of past failures. I had learned to accept these modest offerings without expecting the comprehensive recognition and validation I had once craved. The trust fund I established for my parents remains active, providing for their basic needs, while preventing the financial enabling that characterized their relationship with Kyle. They occasionally chafe against its restrictions, but have gradually come to appreciate the security it provides in their retirement years. The true gift in this journey, however, wasn't financial. It was the freedom from toxic patterns and expectations that had defined my early life. By establishing boundaries and refusing to participate in destructive family dynamics, I broke a cycle that might otherwise have continued for generations. Today, I mentor young entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds, sharing not just business knowledge, but lessons about self-worth and boundaries. I tell them what I wish someone had told me: that your value isn't determined by parental approval, that success comes in many forms, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and others is to say no to destructive patterns. My relationship with my family remains a work in progress, some days better than others, some wounds still tender to the touch. Yet I've found peace in accepting what is rather than yearning for what might have been. The family I was born into may never fully understand or appreciate me, but the family I've built through meaningful connections sustains and enriches my life in ways I never thought possible. So I ask you, what family patterns have you had to break in your own life? Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with people you love? Share your experiences in the comments below, and let me know if my story resonated with you in any way. If you found value in this journey, Please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories about overcoming family challenges and finding your own path. Remember that sometimes the most powerful gift we can give ourselves is the courage to redefine what family means on our own terms. Thank you for listening, and may you find the strength to create the connections you deserve, not just the ones you were born into.